Greetings of the day from Valley of Words, Dehradun, to inspire joy of reading in young children. This fifth edition of Valley of Words children's literature to reality fiction that focuses on situations, challenges, characters, growing up in villages, towns, and cities of India. This contemporary children's literature has come to reflect the multilingual, multi-regional contexts rooted to realities of life and living in the 21st century. From a careful selection of 10 titles from a plethora of reality fiction for young children, the jury at WOW shortlisted 5 book titles. We celebrate the authors who will join us in virtual conversation soon. Valley of Words invited 5 diverse schools from different locations around Dehradun to create the magic of book reading through the young children's unique participation. The children use inventive ways to enhance their reading experience using puppets, mimes, and role play. Coming to our 5 nominations for literature for children, one of the authors shortlisted is Kamla Bhasin. Sadly, we lost Kamla in September after a brief battle with cancer. But Kamla Bhasin's legacy lives on in her many works, in her stories, her books, and poems. As an activist, poet, author, and trained social scientist, Kamla stood for justice and catalyzed a movement that transcended class, borders, and other binary social divisions. She demonstrated tackling patriarchy by inspiring little girls to dream big and become anything they wanted to be. And to balance this, she challenged boys and men to recognize these dreams and celebrate them. Kamla's writings are used to understand nuances of the most pressing issues of our times. Her words and beliefs strike at the heart of social issues, which she also crafted into dozens of beautifully illustrated books for children. WOW's selection of Kamla Bhasin's Satrangi Ladkiyan, Satrangi Ladke contextualizes the uniqueness of children and busts gender stereotypes still alive in society. May we have the video, please?
कुछ लड़कियों को फ्रॉक पहनना पसंद है, कुछ लड़कियों को पैंट टॉप या जींस में घूमना पसंद है, कुछ लड़कियों को लहंगा पहनना पसंद है, कुछ लड़कियां तो अपने पिताजी का कुर्ता ही चढ़ा लेती हैं, कुछ के बाल हैं छोटे इनके तो बाल ही नहीं है। वाह। इन्हें खंबे पर चढ़ना पसंद है।
तो अभी है हमारा स्टोरी टाइम। तो दीदी आपके लिए लेकर आई है एक बहुत मजेदार कहानी, और हमारी कहानी का नाम है सतरंगी लड़कियां और सतरंगी लड़के। बड़े लंबे बाल, और रिदांश और शिवा के बाल है, शिवा के बाल है छोटे, और कुछ लड़के मोटे हैं, कुछ लड़के पतले हैं, कुछ लंबे हैं और कुछ छोटे। लड़कियां पेड़ पर चढ़कर खेल सकती हैं, लड़के भी पेड़ पर चढ़ के खेल सकते हैं। लड़कियां फुटबॉल भी खेल सकती हैं, पतंग भी उड़ा सकती हैं, और अपने पापा को, अपने पापा को घोड़ा बनाकर उनकी पीठ पर बैठकर भी खेल सकती हैं। क्योंकि हर एक बच्चा जो चाहे, जो बनना चाहे वो बन सकता है। और हमारी कहानी खत्म। तो समायरा, आप बताओगे आपको पूरी स्टोरी में क्या अच्छा लगा सबसे? क्या ये? हाँ, इसमें आप बताओ कि क्या हो रहा है?
टीचर।
ध्यान से
टीचर।
पहले हम सामने देखेंगे, ये है
टीचर।
हाँ, टीचर भी बोल सकते हैं। बच्चा फुटबॉल खेलते खेलते कीचड़ में गिर गया।
Paying tribute to the memory of this iconic personality, I have with me Ms. Jo Chopra McGowan and Dr. Sanjeev Chopra. Jo Chopra McGowan is Executive Director of Latika Roy Foundation, an NGO for children and adults with special needs. Ms. Chopra has worked on disability services, rights, and awareness for around 3 decades. And captain of our ship, philosopher, guide, and director of Value of Words, we have Dr. Sanjeev Chopra. Sanjeev ji is a historian, a writer, a public policy analyst, and was formerly director, Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy. Welcome, both of you. May I start with you, Jo? सतरंगी लड़की, सतरंगी लड़कियां, सतरंगी लड़के is a beautifully conceived, scripted and illustrated book. What would you say that this kind of a book appeals to your wards?
I absolutely love the illustrations of this book. I love the way that different kinds of children are included in a very natural way. And for our children, disabled kids seldom get to see themselves portrayed in literature. It's one of the things that I think most people are uncomfortable with, so they prefer not to give those images. And so kids in wheelchairs, kids who are blind or who are deaf or who have some kind of a mental handicap, they never get to see their images. I remember many years ago, we put out a calendar. We always put it out, and it's filled with images of disabled kids. And there was a little girl in a special school here in Dehradun, the Tibetan school, and she looked at this picture of a girl with Down syndrome. And she took the calendar and she went to the mirror and she looked at herself and she looked at the picture and she looked at herself and she looked at the picture and she said to her teacher, "It's me." And she was so moved by it that finally somebody thought she was worth taking a picture of. It wasn't a picture of herself, it was another child. but she recognized that commonality. And I think that's what one of the things that this book does is that it portrays kids who may not be traditionally attractive or able or really a part of society. And it says, yes, you are.
That's what Kamla Bhasin stood for, you know, diversity and uniqueness of every child, every being. And I think Priya Kuriyan has done a fantastic job of illustrating
Which is
the book.
just amazing.
Yeah. Sanjeev ji, just look at the way this book has been, designed. You can read it both ways.
Yes, I know. I saw it, and the moment it came for. This is the first time I saw see a book like this. You know, it's absolutely fascinating, and as was brought out by the children. In fact, the beautiful part is how easily school children of the children of that age could relate to this book. You know, and I like the one that girls can be in frocks, they can be in the
Yeah.
father's thing, they can be this, boys can be
Play
fine.
dolls.
So I think it's a, and I think unless we start at this age, unless otherwise all these things with body shaming and orientation, I think it's very important that we start at this point. And as Joe mentioned, the fact that your children could relate to this book means a lot. It means a lot. I think Kamla ji and Priya Kuriyan, especially, I think equally important is the role of Priya Kuriyan because this is technology, so things happen here in the right place. But it's okay. We cannot take the environment out of us, so it's fine.
Yeah.
So I think.
So, and this, look at this simple sentence. क्योंकि हर बच्चा अपने आप में अनोखा है. Sorry, she says, बच्चे जैसा भी बनना चाहें, बन सकते हैं, क्योंकि हर एक बच्चा अपने आप में अनोखा है. So she says these simple things with using simple phrases and words, but conveys such a powerful, hard-packed message. Tell me, Sanjeev ji, she stood for her beliefs and her activism encompassed a lot of areas. Could you tell us something about that?
See, my association with her goes back to the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy, because she was very intrinsic to the National Gender Center, which was there in the academy, and therefore she used to come at least once a year to address the not only the officer trainees but also the specialized courses on gender and various things. So apart from the theoretical aspects of patriarchy and so many things, the remarkable thing was her ability to connect. She could connect with anyone, and connecting with people who are read. I mean, for those of us who are well read or supposedly well read, we feel that it's easy to connect with those who are of the same background, right? But I noticed how easily she could connect with the drivers, she could connect with the staff, she could connect with the workers, she could connect with the mess people, and reaching out to them, because frankly, the sort of domestic violence issues that we used to see in the academy, she was able to address the women. And I could see a certain sense of empowerment happening because of her sessions with our staff. And I'd also like to mention another thing, that uh, her documentation of partition stories, her documentation of the horrors of partition and its impact on women, that is something really remarkable. Because before that, we never looked at, partition literature was in terms of men and properties and displacement and in terms of, infrastructure. But getting the voice of partition women into mainstream literature is a very seminal contribution. And this has also been pointed out by one of the winners of this year's non-fiction awards, Ishtiaq Ahmed Sahab. He mentions in his book about the great role which Kamla Bhasin has done in documenting the partition stories.
Yes. Joe, Kamla Bhasin's beliefs on social justice without, mincing any words, reached a lot of areas, pluralism, diversity, like Sanjeev ji's mentioned about gender equality. Which of these, and also about disability, which area do you think you can, identify with and your work that you've done all these years?
Actually, Kamla is a legend in my world. I began my life as an activist in the United States, where I was arrested many times, went to jail many times for social justice issues. I met my husband, who's not Sanjeev Chopra, he's Ravi Chopra, on 2 protest marches. Ravi was on a march from Philadelphia to New York to protest the emergency that was currently on in India, and I was on one for human rights and disarmament. And so our lives together have always been about activism. And Kamla is one of the first people that I met when I came to India. That was back in '81. And at the time, her son was, I guess, just a few years old. And I remember being really struck by his disability and the kind of seamless way that he was integrated into the family, and how, kind of the family revolved around him. But it was just a blip. It didn't strike me that one day I would be in the same situation. But seeing Kamla's ability to continue to live her life, in spite of having a very severely disabled child, really inspired me. And I think that for women in general, um, she's been an icon. She's been somebody who has lived her life in spite of many difficulties. Her daughter dying by suicide, her son with this disability, all of the things she had to struggle against, and yet to continue to hold her values strong, to inspire other people. Her music, her singing, her public speaking. I mean, she's just so mesmerizing to watch on a stage.
She was a modern social reformer, I feel.
Yeah,
That,
yeah.
totally an icon. Kamla Bhasin's works had a strong vein of, gender equality, and she veered more towards feminism. So, Dr. Chopra, what in your vast professional experience of working in different areas all over India, do you think that her beliefs and her activism translated onto the ground and made a difference?
Absolutely. You see, the point is that we have to realize how deeply entrenched patriarchy was in our society. It's not going to be, I mean, just because Kamla Bhasin is there, and just because you have a National Gender Center, and just because you have laws which have been made, last 20 years, is not going to change things overnight. It is the fact that an impact, it's like a big mountain of patriarchy has been attacked. And that mountain of patriarchy is crumbling. It's crumbling much faster. And one of the points that she would say in all her speeches is that, in all her addresses, that patriarchy affects men as much as it affects women. So it's not just, it's not just a discourse in feminism. It's a discourse of equality.
Equality.
So I would think, in fact, that sometimes when we classify her, I think she stood for equality. She stood for human rights. She stood for, and her impish smile said it all. I mean, she had such an impish smile. She had such a way to connect, and she could connect with everybody. And that's something, which WOW wants to do intergenerational, intergenre connect, and connecting with everybody across ages, and the ability to take everybody along, the ability to convince the most patriarchal of men to sit in dialogue with her.
Yeah.
So I think that is the remarkable part. Starting her communication in a non-adversarial manner, that I think was a forte. And the Academy really gained a lot from her. And it would have been, it's really, what can one say? It would have been so nice if you
If she were there, yeah. So,
Switch it off.
Kamla Bhasin celebrated uniqueness and diversity in life. And I end the session by quoting from one of her works, Many Notes, One Symphony. We can join together only if we are different. If all notes are the same, how will their coming together make a rag and create music? One note does not create music. One color does not create a painting. And Kamla Bhasin lives on in the music and color of her vast body of work. Thank you so much, Dr. Chopra and Joe. Thank you for sparing time for our session.
Thank you for
Great
inviting
pleasure.
us, and thank you for curating the Children's Festival of